Hello and welcome to this video on Willow as a species for bonsai. Willow can be turned into some of the most stunning of bonsai with extremely unique specimens and appearances that are almost unique to the willow family. For this video though, we will focus on the weeping willows, but many of the same principles apply to others of the same species. Weeping willows can be very stunning bonsai, but they have high care and styling demands. One of their quirks is they also need a lot of water. They also have a lot of growth each growing season. This means that they often suffer from neglect, even with the smallest amount of neglect. If you can, you also need to make them into a larger specimen. We're talking something in the realm of 30 to 50 centimeters. That's still larger than most standard bonsai, but not so large as some of the extreme specimens out there. This is because you need that size to scale the hanging branches and leaves appropriately. One of the benefits to the willow family, and particularly weeping willows, is that they are so fast growing that you can see results in only a few years, versus possibly decades for other species. The reason we focus on weeping willows in particular is that there are several hundred species of willows in general, and going through the others would simply be a waste of time and effort, when, for the most part, people will rely on either the weeping willow or those that are closely related. In nature, it has long drooping branches. It has yellow, almost green twigs that hang down to the ground and come from these branches, and it is from here that you begin to see the leaves. The tree itself is native to China and other parts of the northern hemisphere. There are a series of very closely related trees, and they all often get given the name weeping willow, although scientifically they are unique species. The tree itself grows to somewhere around 20 meters in height. As a wild tree, it grows between 80 and 200 years old. That is under favorable circumstances. Under less favorable circumstances, that lifetime is shortened dramatically. Willows will often be found in areas that have very moist soil. Think of your swamps and bayous, areas close to large bodies of water, rivers, and lakes. This trait is both beneficial and a problem when treating them as a bonsai. The leaves themselves are often very long and narrow. They go from a dark green through to a bright yellow, almost golden, and then the tree loses its leaves in the late autumn. The willow itself has a very obvious, very green and then dark brown, almost grey bark. The bark itself is very sap heavy. Very much like a fig, the willow can sprout aerial roots from certain parts of the branch. This can be both good and bad depending on where you live. As the willow itself has primarily originated from Asia and parts of Europe, the tree is surprisingly survivable. It has branches that will arc over a large area and then hang. This is almost graceful and elegant. The leaves themselves have a particular texture on each side that is very appealing, especially as a show specimen. The problem with that is that as these leaves get older, they lose their luster and that appearance goes away. This is one reason why you should consider defoliating or possibly pruning your tree back quite harshly. To grow a willow as a bonsai, you need to look at a potting soil that will have a lot of material in it to help with drainage. Although the tree is well developed to growing in moist environments in nature, as a bonsai, this rule is not true. In fact, having excess fertilizer or water can well lead to issues such as root rot, mold, and other problems owing to excess water. This means that any soil you're using to grow it as a bonsai should be very free draining. Some sources suggest either using a very high akadama content, sand or similar in your soil mix, or combining sand and clay. When we talk about watering your willows, we've described how they like to be moist, and this is something you'll need to be very careful with coming summer. Willows in summer will need to be watered multiple times a day. You never want their soil to completely dry out. On the other hand, you don't want to sit them in a bowl of water either. This would soak their roots through and they will begin to rot. Placing your bonsai pot over a pot of water, but not in the water, will be the best option in that case. Even in winter, unlike most trees where you are trying not to water at all, the willow will still need some care and some watering. We've also described how the willow has voracious growth, and to go with that voracious growth is a voracious appetite. You will need to apply both solid and liquid fertilizers on a regular basis. We would advise a solid fertilizer roughly once a month and a liquid fertilizer every 2 weeks. One thing to be mindful of is nitrogen content, which, if you use it at the wrong times and in too high a concentration, can create long internodes. This can also lead to other issues with seasonal changes, particularly when the leaf buds begin to develop and possibly causing damage to them. When you are going to prune your tree, you need to do so in winter, preferably towards the latter end of winter. You also want to remove any excess growth. This will both detract from the growth you do want and ultimately mar your tree's appearance. You want to take it back to 1 or 2 branches. These forks will give rise to many new branches in very short order, and these will trail down from the tree. You may also need to prune these back throughout the growing season, through summer and possibly into autumn. One of the concerns with these is that before you can even look at pruning it back, you need to get the right shape, and wiring will be necessary for that. One of the issues with this is that you need to decide when to wire, as that growth is going to make finding the right places difficult and then wiring difficult. The right time of year is essential, and at least in the northern hemisphere it should be done around June. You also need to make sure you take the wire off so that it does not bite into the bark. This will take a long time to heal if it does occur. One of the other concerns with older growth, especially damaged growth, is that it becomes quite brittle, and you may not be able to use wires on it at all, but require guy rope or guy wire instead. Unlike some species of bonsai, you cannot bring willows inside, or at least not without a lot of preparation, and it's best practice not to do so at all. You should generally keep it in full sun. In some situations and locations, semi-shade may be more appropriate, but overall, full sun is what it needs. That sunlight will promote that full growth. You should also try and avoid exposing it to unnecessary frost. Some small amount of damage is to be expected from any exposure, and if you can move it into a safe space, it is best to do so. Willows, because of their voracious appetite and growth, will often have a lot of roots developing very quickly. These will ultimately lead to using up all of the material available. That's what allows it to put on so much growth. The aggressive growth will taper off over time, but initially, your young trees will need to be repotted possibly twice a year. You can try and mitigate this by training it in another pot initially, and then transferring it into a bonsai pot. One other factor to consider, especially with repotting, is that any cuttings you are taking are liable to give rise to new trees in very short order. This is in fact one of the problems that is associated with willows. In some municipalities they are considered an invasive or pest species, and as such, propagating them, and in fact any kind of sale of them, is considered illegal, or frowned upon. Other considerations with the willow family, and the weeping willow in particular, is that they are prone to particular diseases and pests. One of these is the willow borer, and, if any of your trees become infected, anticipate large-scale losses. You can, to a degree, mitigate these by using pesticides and getting professional care. Ultimately, you may want to consider them a loss. Another concern is that the weeping willow has a relatively short lifespan. Compared to other bonsai which may survive for centuries or longer, The willow may only survive for 20 to 25 years. Finally, and in summary, the weeping willow is and can be an absolutely stunning bonsai when well cared for and styled, but neither of these things is easy, and as such, the willow family is not something friendly for those who are new to bonsai, and in fact may not be suitable for anyone without considerable experience. Not only do you need to know your way around the tree, but also the tools and methods that are open to you. For this simple reason, willows are a great thing to look at, but not necessarily the first tree someone should have a go at, and in fact something they should build up to over a long period. Thank you for watching this video. If you have found it interesting, consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. Please post any comments, questions, or suggestions below.